because when you guys immigrate over here, have a baby, your baby gains citizenship from America. Okay, so now your baby is able to grow up and be identified as American, even though they're from Jamaica, even though they're from Nigeria and they're Jamaican American, they're Nigerian American, but they're also, aren't they still black? So they're Black American. Aren't they African descent? So they're African American. So they're able to anchor on to our ethnic identifier. So that tells us that our ethnic identifier is not exclusive just to us. It's open to any black person across the world who immigrates here, have a baby, gain citizenship, and they too are African Americans or Black Americans or both.
Foundational Black American, FBA, Tariq Nasheed's definition. In Tariq Nasheed's words and framing, foundational Black Americans are Black people in the United States who are the descendants of those who were enslaved in the U.S. during chattel slavery. It emphasizes those who have a lineage directly tied to building the foundational wealth, infrastructure, and culture of America, from slavery to Jim Crow to modern systemic racism. Nasheed often says FBA means Black Americans who built this country from the ground up, whose ancestors picked the cotton, built the railroads, and fought every war while being disenfranchised. Key concepts, according to Nasheed, excludes recent Black immigrants from Africa, the Caribbean, or Latin America, focuses on lineage, not just race, claims cultural and economic ownership of Black American identity and legacy, sees Black immigrants as often benefiting from civil rights struggles without sharing the historical burden, advocates for FBA-specific reparations, not race-based reparations for all Black people. If your people didn't come through American slavery and fight through Jim Crow, this ain't your lineage.
But the thing is, there's a mixture. We are a mixture. What makes us foundational Black Americans, that we're mixed with the indigenous and we're mixed with the Africans who were brought over during the slave trade. And then we had an ethnogenesis. So we became a whole new ethnic group. And that ethnic group was the foundation of the United States, making our ethnic group indigenous to the United States, because we're the first ethnic group of what would become the United States, who built it. We built this thing from scratch. So that makes us indigenous. Unlike the Europeans who came from somewhere else, we were created here. Our ethnogenesis is here.
ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, Yvette Carnell's definition. In Yvette Carnell's framing, ADOS is a lineage-based political identity referring to Black Americans who descended from U.S. slavery, specifically those who were here during slavery and Reconstruction. It's meant to create a separate data-driven political category to demand reparations and targeted government policies. Carnell has said, ADOS is about correcting the economic injustice caused by slavery, Reconstruction theft, Jim Crow, and mass incarceration that affected a specific group, not every Black person. Key concepts, according to Carnell, focuses on economic justice using data, e.g. median Black wealth, racial wealth gap, calls for a reparations agenda and exclusion of non-ADOS people from certain affirmative action programs, believes that lumping all Black people into one group, immigrant and native, hides the unique harm done to ADOS, pushes for a political identity, not just a cultural one. We're not just Black. We're a specific group with a specific claim, and that claim is owed by the U.S. government to the people it harmed directly.
70% quote unquote African, 30% white, European, right?
That's salute. That's fine.
You can't tell me that I'm just African though. See,
See, but look, you're picking and choosing.
No, I'm saying I'm both. I'm both.
My girl.
Like when you talk about when you think about the fact that slave women did not have control over their own bodies.
You're right.
Right?
Yes.
You know that you are going to, that's why we run the gamut all the way from as light as me to really dark skin. We run the gamut. That's why. So it's people want us to kind of, I don't understand the need of somebody needing me to be African. I'm an amalgamation. That's what it means to be American. That's what it means to be ADOS in this country. We are an amalgamation of different things. We are unique. So yeah, some of our ancestors came over here, were brought over here, chattel slavery. That's true.
DOS term is a very good term. I actually like that. Descendants of slaves or descendants of slavery. Very good term.
I think it's worth pointing out that immigrants are piggybacking on the Black experience in America. I'm sorry to say this to the Hispanics in the audience, but I'm sorry you're going to have to throw in your lot with, the Asians and the whites. We didn't descend from slaves. We don't get special benefits. This is the logical, normal, obvious point, and therefore it is the Republican position. The whole reason this country is sensitive to racial issues is because for about 200 years, African Americans got the short end of the stick. There was slavery, there was Jim Crow, and then we had the civil rights laws saying, okay, that's it. We owe them. We're going to spend it all on them. Now suddenly, an immigrant who arrived Friday is demanding special benefits. No, what did we do to you?
Barack is president of the United States of America. We have to understand what Barack says he believes. So we can't get angry at him, Dr. Mavo, when he says the rising tide will lift our boat, because that's where he was raised. That's not to put anything on him. The descendants of enslaved Africans in America have a different experience. First of all, we're the only group of people in this country that did not voluntarily come here. We're forced immigrants. We're also the only group of people in this country that the American government made laws against to keep in bondage. America, one thing about America, they love to talk about stuff. They said, let's talk about it. You talk about it, you get it out. But when it comes to the black, enslaved and black people, they say, shut up, be quiet, don't talk about it, because blacks, we are America's dirty little secret, as Dr. Claude Anderson said. And America don't want to deal with the whole question of the reparation, repair, and the damage.
Okay, so as an FBA, Foundational Black American, our position is very simple. Okay, we are black people, essentially. We're from African descent, just like every other black person, right? Quote unquote. But like every other black person, we need to be uniquely identified by our ethnic group. For example, you have Nigerians. Nigerians are different from Kenyans, but aren't they both black? Aren't they both from African descent? Okay, but they don't have the same shared history. They don't speak the same shared languages, and they probably eat different foods to a degree. So that's enough for them to say, I'm not you, you're not me, I'm Kenyan, you're Nigerian, and so on and so forth throughout the 54 countries in Africa. But let's not stop there. Let's look at the diaspora. We'll see folks from the island, right? Aren't they all West Indian, right? Aren't they all Caribbean? But this person believes that they should be called Belizean, right? And this person believes they should be called Jamaican, Trinidadians from St. Croix, right? Because they believe those differences, no matter how small they are, that's enough to identify them separately from their neighbors who are all black, who are all African descent, from African descent. So we're in America saying likewise with us. And you can say, but you have your own ethnic identifier. You're black, you're African, or you're African American, or you're Black American. And I say, well, we say, those who say they're ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves, FBA, Foundational Black Americans, and even those who say they're freedmen. We say, wait a minute. Because when you guys immigrate over here, have a baby, your baby gain citizenship from America. Okay, so now your baby is able to grow up and be identified as American, even though they're from Jamaica, even though they're from Nigeria and they're Jamaican American, they're Nigerian American, but they're also, aren't they still black? So they're black American. Aren't they African descent? So they're African American. So they're able to anchor on to our ethnic identifier. So that tells us that our ethnic identifier is not exclusive just to us. It's open to any black person across the world who immigrates here, have a baby, gain citizenship, and they too are African Americans or black Americans or both. All right. So we're saying, nah, that's not good enough. We need a unique ethnic identifier no matter what citizenship you gain, no matter what you do in life. You're not the same as us. We're still exclusively different than every black person in the world. Okay. So we felt like African or becoming generic Africans, being the generic black man, isn't exclusive enough, as the point I just made, the example. So for that reason, we came up with terminology that no black person around the world and no person, period, around the world can anchor onto our ethnic identifier, which would be foundational black Americans, because that's talking about the period where we were used, our free labor was used to export tobacco, rice, sugar, and cotton. Okay. That's only for us, right? Those, when I say us, I'm speaking about those who can trace their lineage, at least one parent back until about 1865, 1870, around Emancipation Proclamation. Okay. Um, who helped build the railroads, right? Who worked in the coal mines and the steel mills. We're talking about those folks. That's who we're talking about when we say foundational Black American freedmen and adults, American descendants of slaves. So no other black person, no matter their citizenship or lack thereof, they can never anchor onto that experience. Okay, and that's who we call foundational Black Americans. That's just a short, brief explanation to suspend all the confusion. Okay, so I hope that made enough sense. All right. So we believe we should delineate like everybody else in the world, black, white, Chinese, Indian. We believe we should disaggregate like every other human being in the world. Everybody's done it. We're the last to do it because our ethnic identifiers keep being co-opted by other people, and it's not exclusive. You can't have an all-inclusive ethnic identifier. It has to be all exclusive. So we took it upon ourselves to rename it where nobody can hijack it, co-opt it, or anchor to it. So I hope that made a lot of sense to you. I know it did. Peace.
Let me say that again. I am not black, okay? Hear me out. Growing up, my mom absolutely hated when we refer to ourselves as black. She's like, you're not black, you're Nigerian, you're African. I feel like the term someone is black obviously comes from the slave era, but it also just describes displaced people that don't know their heritage. So I feel like people that do know their heritage, to try and curb racism in some way, people are going to be racist. Ignorance is ignorance. You can't, but just curb racism in a small way. Stop referring to yourself as black. You know, if you know where you're from, you're raised in a certain household. You know, Somalians are Somalians, Ethiopians are Ethiopians, Nigerians are Nigerians. Like, if you know where you're from, why refer to yourself as a color? I feel like when we say black, it just sounds so harsh, and like, this is black. I'm brown. You know, I'm Nigerian at the end of the day. Like, that's who I am. That's where I come from. So I understand when you say black British or black American, because you don't know where you're from. You're just a person of color in the city that you're in. Obviously, you still be treated the way you're treated, but just like, I feel like it just, when I hear someone refer to me as black, it just sounds so harsh, especially coming from a certain demographic. I think if you have the privilege of knowing where you're from, you shouldn't refer to yourself as a color, because it further, pushes the racism narrative and further
The way how African Americans prioritize blackness isn't necessarily the same way in which an immigrant would prioritize their blackness. So, you know how African Americans will say, oh, black writer, black creator, black artist, black lawyer, black doctor, black woman in STEM. No, when we come to this country, it's immigrant or nationality. Maybe our career is next, and then whatever else comes after that. So immigrant, Jamaican, marketer, whatever else comes after that. The issue that you're having is we don't see ourselves as one of you. So while you are fighting your fight, which is that of blackness, we are fighting our fight as immigrants first before the way.
Another thing before I get off, man, you 110% right about Africans, brother. 110%. My mom is from Nigeria. My father's from Liberia. Tariq, you are 110% right about Africans, bro. My entire life, man, my family used the word akata like it was nothing. My mom use it, my uncles use it, cousins use it. They all have their ideology, and they are totally different from black Americans. I put my family on that, man. My wife is an American. When I first met my wife, my mom didn't want me to marry my wife, Tariq. She told me, you brought an akata here. Don't bring no akata.